All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the fall 2017 Howard County 4-H Volunteer Information Session. These are being held throughout the months of October and November in person, but we want to give you another option and a way to view and participate in what we're doing. So we decided to let you have a look at the PowerPoint and the quiz and everything this way. So what we're going to be talking about, four things. One is we're going to do our Working with Minors training. This is a training that you all have to do every 2 years to ensure that you are kept compliant with Purdue's expectations when it comes to working with minors. We're going to talk a little bit about diversity in action and what that means on the local level, social media and its uses, and then a refresher for our leaders on what we're supposed to be doing. So there are 3 different sheets that you need to have access to online. 2 of them are just simple sign sheets saying that you have listened to and watched this and you understand what your expectations are both as a volunteer and you understand those kind of things. And then the other one is the quiz. So for right now, I need you to go ahead and get your quiz out. You have to fill this quiz out and it has to be brought into our office. So if you watch this video, make sure that's something that you take care of. We will provide the answers as we go along, but you need to make sure you mark them, put your name on it, and bring it to us. So we will do this together as we go along. Please feel free to mark the answers. I will try to help you out as much as I can, and then we'll walk through the quiz at the end. So, youth safety and reporting child abuse. This training is conducted in Howard County, Indiana in October and November of 2017, facilitated by me. It was originally developed in April of 2015 as a response to the incidents at Penn State. All of the Big Ten schools, Purdue included, have decided to do something to be proactive about making sure that we understand youth safety and what we are supposed to do in the event of child abuse. We want to ensure the protection of all minors who participate in any university-sponsored program or activities. Please understand that any 4-H activity is a university-sponsored program or activity, with Purdue being a land-grant university administered by the United States Department of Agriculture. It is our job to make sure that anything that we do that is 4-H related protects the minors who are involved in our programming. From now on, anytime you hear the words volunteer or staff, those 2 things are synonymous. By being a volunteer in the 4-H organization, you are staff of Indiana 4-H and Purdue Extension. So anytime you hear that, that means you. So what we're going to look at here, training is provided on 2 different areas. The first is youth safety, and the second is reporting child abuse. This training is good for 24 months, 2 years. We will continue to offer it every other year to make sure that everybody is kept within compliance. The reason that we're going to do it and that we ask you to do it when we put it forward is because if that coverage would lapse, if your training would be lapsed and something would happen, you are liable and there is no protection as a club leader. This is something that has to be done and you have to keep current. A certificate of completion will be in the office. You do not have to have one. We will provide you one if you would like one. So, youth safety. Our overall goal is to keep kids as safe as possible at all times. So there's some things to remember about when we're working with youth. First of all, adults, your job is to be a positive role model for minors at all times. That means anytime you're observable in your behavior, you need to be thinking about, okay, what are the kids going to see me doing? What are the parents of those kids going to observe me doing? And thinking about what is appropriate behavior. It's your job to be the eyes and the ears of the program. We have approximately 650 traditional 4-Hers involved in our program. There is no way for me to see what goes on with every single one of them. So you're my eyes and ears. You guys are the ones that are going to let me know what's actually going on, boots on the ground kind of thing. I would ask that you behave appropriately and monitor the behaviors of others. One of our famous sayings from Homeland Security is, if you see something, then say something. And I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. I would rather you contact me and be wrong. I would rather you call me and say, I think this is going on and it's not, than ever have the one-time situation where you didn't tell me when you saw something or heard something. Do not ever hesitate to call me and contact me. Avoid any behaviors that could cause harm or be misinterpreted. Make sure we are doing things that are for the best of the kids and keep safety in mind at all times. So, some behaviors to avoid. Now, all of these on this slide talk about sex, but I'm going to tell you that you can substitute the word alcohol for sex, you can substitute the word drugs for sex, and the same thing applies. So we need to avoid any sexual activity with minors, making sexual comments to minors, telling sexual jokes to minors, sharing sexually explicit materials with minors. All of those are no-nos. But the same thing goes for alcohol. Don't share alcohol with minors. Don't make jokes about alcohol with minors. Don't share it with minors. Don't tell them how to get it. Don't tell the story about that one time when you had a fake ID. Don't do things like that. Same thing goes with drugs. Now, it's one thing to look at a kid and say, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I drank when I shouldn't have. That's a whole lot different than, oh, it was so cool that one time we got a fake ID and we fooled that guy and bought a sixer. Okay? So, what can you do to protect yourselves and the youth that you are supervising? First of all, the most simple thing we can do is don't ever be alone with a single minor. Okay? Most sexual abuse incidents happen in a one adult, one child situation. If we take those away, then life becomes much simpler. The best thing that we can do is have multiple adults in place anytime we're working with youth. If that can't happen, then we need to have multiple youth with the adult. The reason being, the more people are around, the less likely there is for A, something to happen, or B, somebody to accuse you of something happening. Okay? The other thing we need to talk about with this is adult doesn't necessarily mean somebody that's 60 years old. An adult can be an older youth. An adult for this purpose is characterized as anyone who is 2 years or more older than someone else, because that establishes an imbalance of power. So for a 3rd grade kid, a 5th, 6th, 7th grade kid, in their eyes, could be considered an adult. Okay, so we need to be very cognizant of not just our leaders' interactions with youth, but also our older youth interactions with youth. Do not meet with minors outside of established times for program activities. Okay, this doesn't mean that you can't have your daughter's best friend Susie come over to the house and spend the night. What this means is, don't look at a group of kids and say, hey, anytime one of you guys wants to stop by and work with our horses, you go right ahead. Because what happens when little Johnny gets dropped off at your house at 8:30 at night and you have no way to get him home and you're the only one home? So, if you do have to meet with a minor outside of an established time, there's some good ideas and tips and tricks for things you should do. 1. Meet in an open, well-lit room with windows observable by other adults. I'm sitting in my office. My office has a door and no windows. This is not an area I would want to meet with a youth one-on-one. Another good thing to do is get written permission from the adult. Okay, that may come in the form of an email or a text message or something else like that, but make sure that the parent of that child knows that you are interacting with them on a one-on-one basis. The best thing we can do, we've talked about it over and over, have more than one adult involved in what's going on. That doesn't necessarily need to be your co-club leader or a project leader or something else. It could be any adult, preferably though one that's gone through our training about working with minors. Watch out for older children and adults who take children away from the large group, okay? We're not talking about the trip to the bathroom and they're back in 2 minutes. We're talking about, oh, well, we're going to go work in this part of the barn while the big part of the group's over in this part of the barn. We're concerned about those kind of behaviors. Because sometimes older adults or older children and adults will have younger favorites, these kids that they kind of attach themselves to, and that's not always a normal behavior. We need to be watching for those things. We need to make sure we're supervising our older children and our younger children. Like I talked about a few minutes ago, anything more than about 2 years can be an imbalance of power, and it can be one of those adult-child relationships, even though we wouldn't traditionally consider the older child to be an adult. We should never have anything going on at a club meeting, an activity, anything 4-H related, where we look at a parent or a trusted adult and say, nope, you can't come and be a part of this. Now, it's one thing to say, no, you can't come in the ring and help your child there, but we cannot say, okay, you need to stay outside the barn while we go in and do this. You need to not say, okay, we're going to go over in this small room and do this while you guys stay out here. Or, nope, you can't come in and see what these kids are doing together. We need to be very cognizant of what that looks like and be very careful with that attitude of exclusion. It looks bad for our program, and it looks bad for you individually. So, some other precautions. Do not invite individual minors to your home. Again, this goes back to that first slide. If you're going to have somebody at your house, make sure the parents know and understand what's going on. Do not engage in romantic, sexual, alcohol, or drug-related conversations with minors. Avoid doing that at all costs. You want to make sure that the conversations you have with kids are above board and appropriate. Online communications with minors should be limited to that which is relevant with the program. We're going to talk a little bit more about this during social media, but I would encourage you, if you are emailing back and forth with a family, copy me on the emails. You're going to see my email address at the very end of this thing. Anytime you've got to communicate with parents, just put me as a carbon copy or a blind carbon copy. That protects you so that if somebody comes back and says later, oh, well, they were sending me inappropriate messages, nope, I have every bit of the conversation. Anytime you can document something to share with me, it protects me and protects you in that situation. So we'll talk a little more during social media about that kind of thing. This one here is important. Touch a minor only to address the minor's needs in line with and the purpose of the program's mission and culture, and for clear educational, development, or health-related purposes such as the treatment of an injury. What I'm going to tell you here is, ideally, you would never have to touch a child physically. But we all know that there are projects where that's not possible. If you're showing a child how to hold a calf correctly, you're going to have to take them by the shoulder and move them where they need to be. If you're doing shooting sports, you can't let that child just sit there and shoot without putting the stock firmly against their shoulder. You may have to reach around them and get the gun into the position where, or the firearm into the position where it needs to be. If we're talking about riding a horse, some of these children are not big enough to get on the horse themselves, so we're going to have to assist them getting up. What we're talking about here is we're not putting our arm around a kid just to put our arm around a kid. We're not picking up kids and carrying them around just to be funny. We want to make sure that if we're going to physically touch a kid, it is with purpose and a reason, okay? And anytime a kid looks at you and says, no, don't touch me, you want to stop. The reason being is you don't want to push a boundary that kid's not comfortable with, and that boundary is going to be different for every single kid. Now, if you get a kid that's unhappy because they can't do an activity, but they don't want anyone to assist them physically and help them, have that family contact me, and I will explain our position on the situation, that we have to be able to find a middle ground with them. We've not had a fight. In the 2.5 years I've been here, we've never had a fight. We've never had an issue with minors going after each other. Knock on wood. Hopefully it won't happen. But if it does happen, you need to document that and contact me as soon as possible. I need to know that. I have an incident form that I need to fill out. Do not touch minors in an inappropriate manner. Do not engage in any abusive conduct of any kind. Don't push, shove, hit, or anything when you're separating them. Okay? Please be very cognizant of the fact that you are a full-size adult and these children could very easily be harmed more by separating the fight than actually the fight itself. Some other guidelines to follow. Watch out for adults who make children uncomfortable by ignoring their personal space limits. Beware of adults who want to touch, tickle, and wrestle with a child when the child does not want it. Do not use, possess, or be under the influence of alcohol or drugs while on duty or when responsible for minors' welfare. Not only will you be removed as a Howard County volunteer, you will be reported to the authorities for neglect in that situation. I do not mess around when it comes to those things. Alcohol and drugs do not happen while you are working with Howard County youth. If you're transporting minors, at least 2 program adults must be present in the vehicle. I understand this is not always going to be possible. We had a situation last year where we had one chaperone and 4 kids go to a trip in a car that only held 5 people. So what we've done is we've purchased 2 dash cameras to be checked out of the office. They can be placed into your car, and instead of facing forward to show the road, they're going to be turned around and face towards the car. That way, nobody can come back and say, oh, well, he had his hand on my leg, or she was driving inappropriately, or saying things she shouldn't have. We're going to protect ourselves that way. When you come into the office to check one of those out, if you're going to be in one of these situations, we'll give you a little tutorial on how to use it so that you can protect yourself. Try to avoid using your personal vehicle to transport kids. We know that this is hard on the county level. For bigger trips, we always either rent a car or use a Purdue vehicle. Excuse me. This last one is important. Do not possess or use any firearm or explosive device while transporting minors or while working with minors. Now, we all know that with shooting sports, that's not completely possible. What we would like to ask you as the office is, and we understand that a lot of people have concealed carry permits and a lot of other things like that, we would ask that if you are transporting minors, either to a meeting or from a meeting, or even if they are just a family friend or something else, please put your firearms in the trunk while you are transporting those youth. It puts you in a safe situation. It puts them in a safe situation. Here a couple of years ago, there was a mom that was shot in Fort Wayne by her 5-year-old daughter who picked her legally purchased, concealed carry permitted firearm, pulled it out from underneath the seat, and shot her in the back. We do not ever want to have something like that happen when you are working with minors. So please, just place your firearms in the trunk while you're transporting those youth, and I appreciate that step being taken. So, some important consequences for you to know. Failure to comply with the Purdue policy will lead to disciplinary action. Okay? It says it may lead, it will. here are the different steps. One, you can be removed as a leader in Howard County, and that's usually the first step that's taken, okay? You lose your status as a volunteer, you're not allowed to work within our program anymore. The second thing is the entire program or activity may be restricted or ended. That means if this incident occurs at a Bronkbusters 4-H Club event, that club can cease to exist, or the Horse and Pony Project could cease to exist, okay? We have to be very cognizant that our actions could affect well beyond us. The last thing is that we will report things to the police and to Child Protective Services if we need to. So understand that your behavior can have far-reaching ramifications when it comes to the things that you say and do. So in summary, please be attentive to what's going on, and if you see something that concerns you, contact me. At the very end, I will give you the Fairphone cell phone number, the number that I carry with me all the time. You need to contact me if you have concerns. We have to work hard to create a safe environment for children. And it's a big thing, but the earlier that abuse is caught, the better the long-term chance of recovery there is for children, okay? Almost 70% of kids that were abused become abusers themselves. We need to avoid that situation if at all possible as a part of our program. So the next thing we're going to talk about is what you're supposed to do if you suspect abuse or neglect. If you are over the age of 18 in the state of Indiana, you are required to report abuse or neglect. Now, they tell you that reports may be anonymous. There has been a problem at times in our area with those reports not staying anonymous. So what I'm going to tell you is, when you go to report your abuse, do not immediately call the police or Child Protective Services. I want you to call me first, and we will make a report to CPS together. Okay? Let me tell you a couple of things. One, no matter what, when you call, they're going to need contact information for the person calling, whether the report is anonymous or not. And that's the way that people sometimes find out who the reporting person was, even when the reports are anonymous. If we call Child Protective Services together, my name and my contact information is what goes on that report, and you are protected. Allow me to be that buffer for you. Call me first. Don't call CPS first. Because, according to Purdue policy, you have to report to both me as your supervisor and to Child Protective Services or the police. Now, you notice I didn't tell you to report to the police. I do not want you to call the police and report directly to them. The reason being is twofold. One, the police are not necessarily trained to deal with domestic abuse and neglect situations, okay? They are designed to stop criminal behavior. CPS is trained to deal with situations of abuse and neglect and will contact the police for criminal matters. So we want to let them do their jobs. The second part of that is we have several smaller areas around here, and if a town marshal or a town police officer gets that report, they do not have a duty to keep that report anonymous. And there's a chance that when you call dispatch, that report will be made known across the airwaves and heard by Kokomo Scanner and heard by all the different groups that listen to Scanner and can hear all those kind of things, and that police officer doesn't have to keep confidentiality. So make sure that you do two things. You contact me and we'll make the report to CPS together. So you may report suspicions to a supervisor or designated person. I am your supervisor and designated person. Now, for example, in shooting sports, you guys have a coordinator, Ron Carter. You guys can report to Ron, but you also need to make sure you make a report to me. And that report doesn't just need to be verbal. You need to write down everything you can remember and everything that happened so that we have a written record of it. And when you call and contact me, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make a written record of everything that was talked about so that we have appropriate documentation for Child Protective Services and for anybody else that would contact me. Okay? If you report in the state of Indiana, as long as you are giving your report in good faith, which means you're not lying and you're not making it up, you are immune from any criminal or civil liability. Okay? The same thing goes for me. Now, we can't promise anonymity, but we can promise that you can't be sued by somebody who you report on. Okay? So, responsibilities under Purdue's policy. All suspected child abuse and neglect must be reported to the police or CPS. We are going to report to CPS. Okay? You can also report anonymously to Purdue's whistleblower hotline. The reason we put this in there and the reason we tell you this is if you have a concern about me, this is who you need to contact. Because in that situation where you're not comfortable going to your supervisor, who is me, you can contact Purdue directly and say, I'm concerned about this behavior from Josh. Okay? So what does the Indiana law say about child abuse? 1, anyone who has reason to believe that a child has been abused or neglected needs to make a report. Staff members, that's you all, who are filing a report also need to notify their supervisor, me, or program representative. Okay? We will file a report together. If an individual believes that a report has already been made, a second report is not required. So, here's the other side of that, call me first. If you call CPS and make a report, I'm not calling CPS to make a report because I know you've already made one, which means that your name is the only one associated with it if something happens. Okay? Child Protective Services, there's the hotline number. Do not call the individual county numbers. You want to call the state. Especially if it's a night or a weekend, instead of them having to just call whoever's on call and send them out, the state will be able to do things differently. Okay, callers can remain anonymous and are immune from all civil and criminal penalties. So here's some sobering things about this. 1 in 10 children report abuse. That means for every 1 kid that would come and say, somebody has abused me, there's 9 more that did not come and report that. Okay? We must believe any kid that comes and tells us that. Because it's not our job to investigate. It's not our job to decide if they're telling the truth or not. It's our job to believe and report. Because if a child tells you they've been abused, you have to believe. You need to remain calm and listen, but don't panic. Remember I said document? This is a good time to be writing down whatever they're telling you. Okay? If they've had enough courage to finally break their silence and tell somebody, they may not tell anybody else for a while. So you need to make sure you hear and listen to everything they say. If you're going to ask questions, make sure they're open-ended. You don't want to guide kids to a certain way of thinking. So you don't want to say, oh, well, did he touch you here? You want to just talk to a kid and keep conversations very open. Make sure you thank the child for telling you. You want them to understand that they're not in trouble. It's not their fault. They did not do anything wrong. And we have a response plan already because your response is to document, contact me, and then we will contact CPS. So, our test. Who is required by Indiana law and Purdue policy to report suspected child abuse and or neglect? Anybody over the age of 18 who has a reason to believe a child has been a victim of abuse or neglect. Okay? How soon should you report suspicions of child abuse or neglect? Immediately. Okay? That's why I'm going to give you the phone number at the end of this. You need to call that fair phone and let me know in this situation immediately. You are only required by law to report to your immediate supervisor if you have suspicions of child abuse or neglect. No, remember, we're going to communicate together with Child Protective Services and your supervisor. And what's going to happen is we're going to report to CPS together, and you've done your duty and reported to your supervisor. And then I am going to call my supervisor and tell them, I've made a report to CPS. My volunteer told me this. Here's my documentation. I'm sending it to you now, and I've done my duty as well. And that goes all the way up the chain because my supervisor will contact their supervisor, and we will continue that process until everybody that needs to know has been notified. Remember our rule from earlier. If it has to do with sex, drugs, or alcohol, don't do it. So all of these things are not okay and are not okay to be doing. Again, if it involves sex, drugs, or alcohol, it's not acceptable. So all of the above. As a program staff member for a program held under Purdue authority, you have the responsibility of protecting minor children by behaving appropriately and monitoring others' behavior. That is absolutely true. If you see something, say something. Most child sexual abuse situations occur in a one adult and one child situation. That is absolutely true. And remember, adults aren't just those 50 and 60-year-old people working with kids. They can be a kid that's even 2 to 3 years older than the one that they're with. Please remember that. If a one-on-one interaction is required, what can you do to reduce the risk of child sexual abuse? Meet in an open, well-illuminated space that's observable by other adults, okay? All those other things are great, but meeting in my office would qualify as meeting in a university building, and I don't have any way for anybody to see what's going on in here. Workspaces are not always good. The one thing I will say is when we talk about videotaping the encounter, in a vehicle where you're transporting kids and you're the only adult there, that may be the only option you have. Please come check out the dash cams and use those for that situation. When transporting minors, what is the best policy? It's not have an expired driver's license. You want to try to transport with more than one adult from the program at all times. Consequences. If you fail to follow the obligations that you have, it can lead to disciplinary action for you, up to and including removal of your volunteer status. Opportunity to use facilities could be revoked. The entire program or activity could be restricted. And in the end, what could happen is they could go nuclear, and Howard County's 4-H program could be completely wiped out, started over, and I could be fired. We would like to avoid that if all possible. So all of the above. Okay? So now we're going to transition. We're going to talk about social media. Now, social media is a great way to keep into contact with parents and families. And the reason that social media is becoming big is because you see a lot of people from my generation, that's the people that are between 30 and 40 years old, that are tied to social media. Now, the generation above me, those people that are in that 40 to 55 age range and even a little older or younger, are tied to email because that was what they learned in the workplace. That's been their big thing, and that's their primary means of communication. For my generation, it's Facebook. For the generation after me, it's Twitter. And then the generation after that, it's Snapchat. So each group is going to have their own technology that really appeals to them. So what we're going to be looking at today is what social media should we be using to communicate with our parents and our invested parties. Okay? Social media is not required. It's not an expectation. It's not something I'm going to look at you and tell you have to do. But it can help with a couple of things. It can really help with meeting attendance. We saw this with the Liberty Clodbusters Club. They averaged, I think, 12 to 15 kids at every single meeting last year, which is huge compared to what some of our clubs are seeing. And we see a lot more involvement. I know that Liberty Clodbusters did all their t-shirts through that, and they did a couple of different fundraisers where all their communication was done through Facebook and email. You don't have to necessarily do it if you're a club leader or if you're a project leader, but find somebody who wants to do it for you. Maybe you've got a mom or a dad who's willing to do it. Maybe you've got one of your junior leaders who's willing to do it for you. So we're going to start out taking a look at the Liberty Clodbusters 4-H Club page. You'll notice that Kim Hanna, who runs Liberty Clodbusters, she does a great job with images. She's a photography person, so her page looks really nice. You'll notice on there that she's got 34 different members. Now this is a closed group. Oh, excuse me. This is a public group. Sorry. She has people that have joined this club so that they can find out information about what's going on. Now, she does two different things. She posts her own information about what's going on with her club, and then she also shares the stuff that comes from our public Howard County Howard County Extension Facebook page. So you'll see right there she has about her llama clinic there on the front page. It says seen by 25. You can tell when people see your posts. Kim would tell you that this Facebook page has been a good way for her to communicate with people. Jackson Livestock R Us 4-H Club, which is a club administered by Lindsay Bartram and Ryan Bartram, they've done the same thing, but they haven't put quite so much into it. Their Facebook following is a little bit smaller, but they've seen a lot of the same kind of things. Lindsay spends a little bit more time just sharing the information that we share off the main page, but it puts it into a position where people are going to see it more often. My generation of parents, those parents who have kids pretty much between the ages of birth and 16 right now, are Facebook people. It started when we were in college, and it's something that the majority of us have experience with. So the parents of kids that we have in our clubs right now are going to be Facebook people. It's going to be an easy way to connect, and it's also a place where we can see all of the communication. I encourage any clubs that have Facebook pages to share that information with multiple people so that everybody can be checking to see what messaging is going on and what's being shared between groups. So for Twitter is something that we use for short-term, quick information. A lot of times we'll use it to let our community partners know what's going on. Anytime we have an event, I will tweet out about it in the Kokomo Perspective, in the Kokomo Tribune, and several local businesses will retweet that information. The radio stations will do that so that people get the information about the programming we have going on. I don't recommend necessarily that clubs have this, but I do recommend that if you're a Twitter person, you follow the county because a lot of our quick update information is there. For example, when we have to cancel an event because of weather or there's a location or a time change, Twitter is one of the first places we put it so that those community partners see it and share that information. We also use Instagram for picture sharing. Sorry, you have to look at my face right here. But what you'll see here is you'll see some pictures from camp. We actually took a lot more pictures at camp, but we made a specific group for some parents, and we sent those pictures directly to them because they didn't want them posted on the main page, but they still wanted to be able to see what was going on. Instagram is a great way to show a visual representation of things that are going on with your project or club. So next we're going to talk about diversity. Diversity is a choice. In Howard County 4-H, less than 3% of our entire program, our 650 kids, are children of color. Okay? That means that our diversity numbers lag behind what the county is. The county is approximately 7% African American and about 1.5% Hispanic. Our program needs to match that if we can. Now, our school programming that we do, our enrichment and our STEM programming, all come out with about the same mark as what the county is. We need to do a better job and get to the point where all of our numbers match that together. So what I want you to start doing is looking outside of the box, okay? We have this mindset of kids that we chase. They're these middle class kids that understand what farming is or understand what building projects are. We need to go past that mindset and start looking at non-traditional 4-Hers, kids that we wouldn't expect to be 4-Hers, and find ways to invest them in our program. In the spring, we'll talk a little bit more about this, and I'll give you some tools for your toolbox of how to increase diversity within your programming. But continue to look for those non-traditional 4-Hers and look for kids that don't have some other activity in their life. As I have to every single year, here's the EEO. It is the policy of the Purdue University Cooperative Extension Service that all persons have equal opportunity and access to its programs, services, activities, and facilities without regard to race, religion, color, sex, age, national origin, ancestry, marital status, parental status, sexual orientation, disability, or status as a veteran. Hear me, please, when I say this. If you are a volunteer of Howard County 4-H and I find out you are discriminating against anyone, you will no longer be a volunteer in our program. We will not discriminate against anyone in Howard County 4-H. Because when it comes down to it, every single person that wants to come to something of our programming or wants to be involved in something of our programming is a person. And every single child that wants to attend or be a part of our programming is a child. And we will treat them as such. They are not gay or straight. They are not black or white. They are not any of the markers we use to describe people. They are humans and children, and we will treat them as such. That is the sternest language I can use. Please understand, I will remove you if you are discriminating against anyone. Okay. So, role of the leaders. We covered this back in the spring, but one more time. I need you as volunteers for a lot of different reasons, but here are the big ones. I need you to help promote safety. We just did the first half an hour on this, okay? If you see something, say something, report it. Abuse, neglect, unsafe situations, alcohol, drugs, any of that kind of stuff. You are my eyes and ears. I cannot see all 650 kids. I need you all to help me. You're also there to ensure that we're educating kids to the best of our ability. It's my job as part of my land grant mission to share information with you. It's your job to share that information with youth. We want to support best practices and provide support to youth. We want to be able to affect change in youth the best way that we can. Okay? I thank you for your support to me. I'm one educator, but the 115 volunteers we have in this county are what make this program great. The 115 volunteers that we have that actually go out and reach and touch into the kids' lives that we have is what make this program great. Thank you for helping me because I cannot do this even remotely close to do this on my own. You guys need to support each other, okay? We are stronger when we help each other grow. We want to best serve the youth of Howard County, and we can do that together. So remember, general volunteers, we will call upon you at different points. Check your email. When you get one of those phone messages, make sure you listen to the whole phone message. Sometimes you'll hear the beginning and go, oh, that doesn't apply to me, but there's something later that may. So please make sure you listen. If you get an email with a recorded sound bite in it, that's for me also. It's the same message that you get on the phone, but it's a chance to go back and listen to it. Club leaders, remember, we're going to try to have 4 to 5 meetings each year. At least one of those meetings needs to be in the fall, okay? Try to let us know all your meeting dates by January 1st so that we can communicate to youth and to families when those occur. We're going to try to post on Facebook at the beginning of each week what meetings are occurring that week. Remember, you need to have at least one educational, one service, and one fun meeting. Okay? If you need help with the service meeting, I will be glad to come and help with it. Remember, your reporting forms that you will get in January must be turned in by April 1st. I will handle all the tax forms again for you this year. Merry Christmas. Remember, 4-H Online, if you haven't scheduled a time with Teresa to learn how to send emails and communicate with your youth through 4-H Online, please schedule a time with her. You can call her here in the office. And postcards. We will send meeting reminder postcards out for you as long as you've communicated when your meetings are. So please get that done. Animal volunteers, superintendents will be contacting you in the next few weeks and months to get ready for the 2018 fair. We appreciate, all you do for us. Exhibit Association, there's going to be 5 seats that are going to be open for next year. If you're interested in serving on the Exhibit Association, please come November 20th at 7 p.m. and let us know that you'd like to serve in that capacity. And the Extension Board. Remember, these are the people that help guide our programming as an Extension office, the Ag Educator, the Health and Human Sciences Educator, and myself. They do a lot of different things to help support us. And then finally, this is my contact information. So that's my email address. You can get a hold of me at that email address. I check email all the way up until the time I go to bed every night. That is the office phone number. I'm going to provide you the fair phone number. This is the number to report child abuse, injuries, accidents, unsafe behavior, any of that kind of stuff. That number is 765-431-0363. Again, that number is 765-431-0363. Please do not hesitate to contact me with any comments, questions, or concerns. Make sure you have signed both of those 2 papers and the test, and you get those all brought here into the office no later than January 1st. Thank you very much, and have a great day.